Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So today we've got the Wednesday, August 17th Cpac meeting, and I'll call the meeting to order. In starting, I'd like to go ahead and introduce who we have with us. We're fortunate to have our consultants here with us in person. It's a great opportunity for us. Looking forward to this meeting. We've got Francois and Flavia who are here with TDJ. We've got Jason and Sam who are here with Catalyst. We've also got Jody who's here with Lee Engineering, and Jay who's here with LPC. And with that, I'll turn it over to Francois.
Thank you, Steele. And I'm going to use this. I think it may be best for the presentation as well.
Sounds good.
Hello? Can you hear me? Good. So, welcome everybody again to today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule during today to be here. You know, it's a while since we connected in February, and we're really excited about today's connection because we wanted to make sure that we hear you, we're here for you, and today we'll discuss quite a few items that will help put our position such that, again, we're connected, and that's why we call this connecting together. You know, NAC together, we're now connecting together. So, next slide, the agenda for today is we want to review the committee, consultants, city staff, what are our roles in the project itself, so that everyone understands it well and follow suit. We also want to do an overview of the project schedule, specifically the engagement schedule. We then want to discuss concerns and questions, about the project, whether it's process or what lies ahead or anything, any question that anyone has. We want to talk about that, and then we're going to discuss a little bit next steps and upcoming meetings. So, in terms of roles and responsibilities, much of this really comes from the resolution that was adopted by council when the advisory committee was established. And it provides very specific direction as to what the roles and responsibilities are. So first of all, there is the maintaining regular attendance at meetings. And you've been here, and that is part of that component. Staying engaged and being participatory. Because we want to hear from you. After all, the advisory committee is the committee that represents the public at large. You, the ones that can share with us what you know and what you hear, what we don't hear as consultants, what staff don't hear. That's why the meeting in the box is such a fantastic tool for you to reach out to the community and tell us. But we need you to participate and to share with the rest of the group as well. Representing and staying connected with the community in the planning process. That's just a confirmation of that point. Providing guidance and direction to staff and consultants at crucial steps in the process. For instance, we have the existing conditions memo that we issued. We had a presentation. Unfortunately, the time was so limited, we could never respond to that, not so. But you, if you haven't received it yet, should have a copy of the memo, and then, of course, you can give us feedback on that. The goal of that document, by the way, is for you to know that we know what we need to know, so that we can do the project. And whenever there's a gap, you must tell us, hey guys, what about that? You don't see that, because you need to know that, otherwise you can't do this project effectively. So it's a crucial point. At some point we will have a vision statement, so we want to have your input on that. So various stages we will get your input through the process. Reviewing and making recommendations on plan elements. Later down the road we will have the plan elements and their recommendations for land use, for transportation, for economics, for utilities. All of that will have some recommendations, and we would want you to review that and also then give some input on that as well. Serving as hosts and assist with facilitating public events when needed, that is a crucial one as well. When they say we're going to have there's the meeting in the box, of course you do that, but there's also the man on the street engagement, or there's some events where team members will be out there and soliciting information for people that they meet. We want you to be part of that process, and be with the team also and see what they do, how they ask questions and how they interact. Maybe you can provide some input there as well. And of course with the public meeting that's upcoming as well. We really want you to engage with the people as they arrive and participate. Recruiting hard-to-reach population to share and obtain input. It is true that in any community you have people that either they just because of their circumstances, economically, socially, whatever may be the case, they just cannot come to meetings or they cannot connect with the internet. We want to hear from those people, and you are our connection with them. So please make sure that we reach out through you to those communities. And of course, maintain decorum at all times. So the governance of this committee, let me just go through this. City Council appointed. There's a chair, there's a vice chair. Meetings are open to the public. That's why we sometimes have people sitting in the audience. They don't necessarily participate, but they are welcome to be there and listen and observe at any point in time. A quorum is a simple majority to conduct business. Council members will serve as resources and are voting members of the committees. So council members have an important role to play because you are there, of course, because you are part of the city governance as a whole. But when you, as part of this committee, you're truly part of the committee, you're one of the committee. And it's important that you can serve as a resource for people to understand this maybe governance better, or to understand issues that the council have with certain things, for the committee to understand it better. That's where you can interact with them and share, and together again you can come up with solutions and recommendations. Consensus is used to move forward, recommend policy or plan elements to the next level. So consensus, we have a little bit slide of consensus. Final drafts are forwarded to the respective advisory boards. Mr. Planning, the Development Commission, the Main Street Board, etc. Committees may remain to track progress of implementation of planning elements. And the point there is that once this project is done, we want to make sure it gets implemented. It mustn't stay on the shelf, and never been opened again. We want you as the committee members to continue participating in implementation. And then we will establish some type of forum, some type of engagement. It's not set yet, but there will be a process for all of you, or those that choose to, or are interested in, to move forward and help council to implement that. And even help hold council accountable as well, as part of the process. So what is consensus? How do you reach that? Well, it's a process by which the group comes to general agreement on issues. It is not unanimity. It's not 100% agreement in other words, but it's the sense of the majority feel that way. It's flexible. It's not so tight that it has to be 100% that everyone has to agree with that particular point. Consensus decision making is achieved by facilitating collaboration within group. So what we do up here when we interact with you, when we have these exercises, like you've seen with the visioning exercises, that was exactly that. We facilitate the process that you can all collaborate and share with us how you come up with a solution, an idea, and then we talk about that. And a sense of open-mindedness, flexibility, and cooperation of group participants is so important because after all, we're all individuals, we all have our own ideas and thoughts and issues and concerns, but it's truly about being open-minded with other people's concerns. It's to have empathy with other people in the group and to hear and listen to others in the process. And then to be flexible, of course. Providing equal time for input into the process. And that's also part of how we facilitate, to make sure that it's not one or two or three that dominates the discussion, but it's truly everyone has the opportunity to share and provide input. Listening, seeking input from others, and participation from all. And that truly is also, as part of consensus, is how I have an idea, but what are you thinking? What is your thoughts? And let's see together how we can come up with a better idea at the end of the day. Seeking a commitment to implementing and supporting the group's decision. So in other words, if the group comes to a decision about, we should do that. Well, it's one thing to say you should do that, but then how do you do that? How do you implement it? How do you make it work? How do you make it happen? And then look for ways to make it happen. And not sit back and say, oh, well, it will happen. No, you sometimes have to put in place that effort or the strategy so that you can achieve that in the long run.
Hey, first of all, can we take a break? Kathleen said she's having trouble hearing you on the other side. I don't know if it's a volume thing. Can we just take a break and make sure she can hear and we can hear her?
So Kathleen, hi. Can you hear me, Kathleen?
It's just not very clear. The volume's fine. It's just not as clear.
Maybe we can slow it down a little bit.
I can slow down, absolutely.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. You can keep going. I just, don't worry about me.
Well,
So,
she'd
let's
be able
just,
to.
let's repeat some of the points about consensus. So, of course, it's not 100% agreement. Decision making or consensus-based decision making is achieved with collaboration. It's achieved when people are open-minded, when they're flexible and are too strong about their own ideas, and they seek cooperation amongst participants. Equal time. As I mentioned, when you facilitate, we want to make sure everyone has the same amount of time to share their thoughts and ideas. Listening, we all need to listen more, not so. I include it. I tend to not listening, but my voice tells me you should listen and not start talking before you've listened. And seeking input from others and participation from all. And then, of course, finding a commitment to help implement the decisions that we come to. At any point, if staff wants to jump in any of these points, please feel free to do so.
Okay.
The next one, slide please, is then the resolution. This is a direct quote from what was the resolution that was made by council. So let me read that. Committee members shall act as a community sounding board for the plan and provide input and feedback on policy recommendations to the P&Z Commission, the Main Street Committee, and City Council. The committee will also act as advisors to and ambassadors of the planning process. You know, that last point I really want to emphasize, being advisors and being ambassadors. So you do two things. You advise the team, the project team, about anything about the project, whether it's a process or how we come to a decision or about an issue that we have as part of the planning elements, that you advise us as a team. But you also become the champions and the ambassadors of the plan. In other words, if there's in the public a discussion about what's going on with that group of people sitting and meeting every month or every second month, and they talk about the comprehensive plan, if people start mumbling, you need to be an ambassador and go to them and say, hey, this is what we do. We do good work there. And share with them so that they know and understand, so that there's not a misunderstanding. So being an ambassador, being an advisor, those two important roles for you. All policies of the plans must be supported by consensus of the responsible committee. So we spoke about consensus before the policy moves forward as a recommendation. So again, the purpose of consensus is that we come up with ideas, there's a recommendation, but we need to have consensus about that. And then, before it goes forward as a policy, that consensus must be reached. And of course, that is specifically then that needs to be considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission, the comprehensive plan itself, and the Main Street Advisory Committee for the Downtown Master Plan. Next slide, please.
Does anyone have any questions about the committee roles and responsibilities or consensus or anything that Francois talked about?
The uncertainty, or does it make sense, or we get a question about that particular item?
Yeah. Kathleen, did you have any questions about any of the material that Francois just went over?
No, if I do, I'll raise my hand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. So let's talk about the engagement schedule, and this basically is a presentation of what you already seen in the packet that you received before. So next slide, please. So as you can see,
And sorry, so we have a copy of all this in your packet. So you've had the agenda, the minutes, a copy of this document, the resolution. So, and then we'll send you a PDF of the actual PowerPoint, but the material itself is in your packet if you guys want to follow along. Sorry, Francois.
so let's read together. No, not read that. Don't worry, but this shows you everything that is part of the engagement. It's a lot of things, but let's go through that in detail. So there's the first phase, and we actually come to the end of the first phase with the planning is in place. We know we have a schedule, everything's in place. So let's go to the phase 2, the initial engagement. That's where we are today. So we, of course, we already launched the meeting in the box. And then all these items are part of this phase. So the first one is about the focus group meetings that we will have. A total of 16 focus group meetings. That's quite a few, not so. And we will start with them today.
The documents
First
missing.
meeting. initial interviews. There will be a
That
total
one
of
document is
15
missing.
of
The one he's
interviews.
going over now.
Today, we start with
Oh, wait,
two
no,
of
no.
them.
Oh, yeah,
Series of 5 online surveys. There's already a survey out, which is the first one, that is for the visioning. That's the topic of that particular survey. There will be 4 others after that. Now, if you see this and think about this, we're right in the beginning stages. A lot of engagement still lies ahead. So as we move forward, we will learn more and more and more and more detailed stuff. And we can ask follow-up questions if we need to as well. Then there's one of the questions which is really the follow-up question that I just mentioned. 2 multi-day engagement events. One is for the comprehensive plan, one is for the downtown master plan. And this event for the comprehensive plan takes place next week, Thursday and Friday. So we're very excited about that. That's a crucial part of this whole process. So we urge you to all be there and participate. We then have a public meeting, which is also next week, Thursday night, as part of that visioning exercise. And with that, there will also be a virtual engagement component, where people that cannot come to the public meeting, there will be virtual rooms where they can access, and there will be things they can do to provide their input, as if they were at the meeting, but they do it virtually. Now, we really don't want people to give up the in-person for the virtual. We really want them to be in person there. That's a preference. So if they cannot, then of course virtual will be an option for the public. Then our 2 additional public meetings for both the comp plan and downtown, so there's a total of 4 more, to share findings, solution input, and to confirm what the consultant team has heard. In other words, we will go back to the community and say, now that we've got input, this is what we've heard from you. And then eventually when we come up with recommendations, this is what we recommend. So every stage of this planning process, the community, the public, has the opportunity to share their thoughts and ideas and give us some input. Now, let us end there. Then we have a phase 3, which is called equitable engagement. And the reason for this is that as the process goes along, we will learn more and more about groups or individuals that we just cannot reach or we don't hear from them. So what this allows for is that we have the opportunity to identify those demographics and then find ways to engage and enact with them. But importantly, the 4 half-day man on the street engagement is really part of that. That's where we out there, we at Cpac, we at a festival, city festival, we in the downtown area, and we engage man on the street, where you can really learn from anyone at that time. Of course, there will be an online survey to collect the public comment on the community vision. Once we have a vision, we want to have a public comment on that. There will also be youth activities and childcare at the public event. So next week, Thursday night, there is actually an extra room available where the children will be entertained, not so.
Yeah, so it'll be a separate, not a separate room, but a separate area where we'll have colors and stickers and snacks for people who want to participate directly in the process. It'll be manned by staff, and we'll kind of help herd the kittens while the grown-ups participate in the process.
And the reason for that also is that sometimes people have struggled getting childcare, so they can't come to the meeting. Well, now they have no excuse, now they can't come to the meeting. So we hope that we get more people because of that, and that they will bring the children and then they can attend the meetings. So phase 4 really is the draft feedback, is when we have a draft put together as a team, and then we want to share that. So there will be an online survey to collect public comments, and there will be one final wrap-up public meeting for both the comprehensive plan and the downtown master plan. So you can see that, again, going through this list, that's a lot of activities for public engagement. It's designed so that we know that this plan truly is representative of the community. It's not a consultant's plan. It's not staff's plan. It's nobody's plan but the public's. It's not your plan. It's the public's plan. We must always remember that. It's important. So,
Do we want to ask, if anyone has questions about that engagement process, the types of events, the timing, where we are at in that process? We'd like to open it up for any questions from the group.
yes.
So on the phase 3 and the equitable engagement, when you say that we will monitor demographics and reach out, that's meaning y'all will kind of do that?
Yes.
And how do we, I guess that's the only area I'm a little worried about. I feel like there's some communities that we in this room are gonna have a hard time having connections with, so I'm just wondering, do y'all have a process for that, of how we can reach out and get involved in those communities
You
more?
know, what we do is, based on the spreadsheet that we have, there may be churches that we can approach and ask them, you know, in your church there are low-income people. Let's say that's a group that we've identified that's really hard to reach. And ask them, you know, what can we do? Can we do it at a church event? Can we come to a church event, for instance? And how can we connect with them there? I don't know yet about the demographics, but I don't know about how many immigrants you have, immigrant communities you have in Barbados. If you have, that may be a group that's difficult to reach, not so. So we will look at who we engage with, who have not been, and if the immigrant groups, one of the groups that we have not engaged with, we will find ways to reach out. Maybe there's an organization that does charity work for them. Then we go to them and say, hey, tell us about your connections. What are the leaders in this immigrant community? So we find those connections, reach out to those connections, and then find ways to reach that particular population or demographic. But that's a good question. Thank you, Sydney.
Francois?
Yes, Steele.
Would it be all right if someone just didn't want to be put on the spot, that they could potentially have the opportunity to write questions down on their sheet and submit them?
Right down.
Just at any point, and then maybe at the end, those could be addressed?
Oh yeah, absolutely, we can do that. Yeah, please, because you know we're going pretty fast because we have so many minutes today. As we go through the presentation today, whether it was early on when we talk about the census, we talk about the solution for the advisory committee. If you have any questions, please write it down. And in fact, you've seen the one slide that says questions and issues. You can bring it up then if you want to. Or you can give it to us so we can review that at the end of the meeting while everyone's still here. We want to make sure that it's a transparent, open process. We hear the questions right here today. So, but thank you, Steele. So yeah, you have those notes that you can use for that. Any other question? No question?
And I just wanted to note, you know, on those online surveys, they're collecting demographic information at the end that asks people where they live within the community, if they live outside the community, what race they identify with, language preferences. So to essentially create a profile of those respondents and participants. So at the end, we can see who we've heard of and who we haven't, and that'll help kind of identify those groups that we need to take a more intentional effort towards, and do that. We're also going to have topic-specific focus groups. So like this week, we're having a focus group on neighborhoods, and we're inviting people from specific areas that represent those communities to come and speak, and same thing for transportation and diversity and equity. So that will also create another opportunity to identify those groups that maybe aren't comfortable coming to public meetings or things like that.
That's why the shown spreadsheet was so important, because that helps us identify people to invite to the focus group meetings, the interviews, etc. Yes.
What about those with language barriers?
I know that some material will be translated in Spanish, but you talk about languages other than Spanish, Barry?
There are other languages spoken
Yeah.
in this community.
Right. I don't know how we were able to do that.
Yeah.
If we
Yeah.
identify that as a big problem, I think we should find a solution. How
A
we
lot
get
of
that.
times, Francois, they have their children, if they have children in their families that they can bring to the group, they usually act as
That's a very good point. Larry, have you heard about that? That if someone is in a language, talks a language that somebody else can understand, because there's a few of us here that say are of that demographic, that sometimes the children, because they're at schools that are in English, that they interpret for their parents. Have you heard about that or seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great idea, Jay. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll also have Spanish interpreters at our public meetings. We'll have sign language interpreters, and we're going to have a Spanish specific focus group in meeting for those people who where Spanish is their first language, and so we'll be very intentional about identifying that group, because we know that it's such a large representation of the community, and those other groups that come up and that are identified, we'll do our best to find alternate ways to communicate with them and get their input.
Kathleen, I want to make sure that you also get an opportunity to provide any comment or if you have any question about the engagement process. Please let us know. Any questions that you may have? Kathleen?
Is she on there, Mike?
Oh.
Your microphone is
So-
muted.
You
Oh.
did.
I promise you, I will raise my hand if I have a question.
Okay.
Sure, but you want to make sure that we do give you opportunity to respond when everyone else
Yeah.
had opportunity.
I think, Francois, the most important thing is to say that it's really in the beginning of the process, and we're just getting started on the engagement.
Yeah, exactly. Be in the beginning of the process. We want to make sure that there's nothing in the process that tells you there's an issue or a concern that's coming up. We're not sure about that, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd also like to take this opportunity to kind of call out one of the handouts that we gave you. This is the revised Meeting in a Box worksheet. And these include changes that were made based on the input from the subcommittee meetings that we had a couple months ago. Essentially, there was a concern about not having questions that would allow for broader, kind of more general input. So we included empty spaces at the end of each section with prompts just to request any and all additional information or questions or things that people want the consultant to know. And at the very end, there's an opportunity for people to add additional topics that they want to hear more about. And so this is live on the website as well. And so just wanted to kind of highlight those changes that we made. And then again, our first official topic survey is out there. We've got it online, it's live. And so that's really that community visioning survey where we're asking those kind of general questions about big picture, future things, and kind of general desires of the community, which feedback from that will help inform future surveys. And I know there was some questions from our subcommittee that they wanted to pose to this group as a whole. And so we can take the opportunity to do that now, Francois, or if you're gonna wait till the end. Okay. Okay, great.
But before I go to the issues, I do want to recognize my team. Still thank you for introducing everyone on the team. I really appreciate that. But the fact that you guys came in today, it wasn't on the schedule, but you guys committed for that today, tomorrow. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate that. And Jay, you look really cool with those shades.
There's gotta be a story.
Yes.
No, I forgot my regular glasses and these are, otherwise I can't see you guys, so that's the most.
We're Nacogdoches. Just saying.
The future is bright.
Yes, absolutely. I like that. So the project team has heard that at the council meeting or council meetings, there were questions, there were issues raised, and there were concerns expressed. Staff has also heard from committee members about concerns and issues. And we as a project team, when we hear about that, when we hear there's something like that, we want to know about that, we need to know about that, so that we can address it, so that we can either adapt the process or do whatever we need to make sure that there are not those concerns by anyone. So the next few minutes, we want to really talk about that. And hear from you, well, what concerns do you have personally? Or even if you've heard about a concern, write it down. Because again, we want to talk about that and get it all in the open, talk about it, discuss it, and see whether we can find a solution for that, a solution as well. So please, there's some cards that you have, and if you can see, please let's for now just put the top, say, 4 items that comes to mind of issues and concerns of Roberts. Of course, if you have 10, don't add them if you want to, it's fine. We don't very much just don't have time to go through all of them, but those top ones, maybe top 4 or 5, just write them down on your card. We appreciate that. And Kathleen, if you can do please the same, have 5 or so of your top concerns and issues. Let's write it down because everyone will share as they had time to write it down. Great, well, everyone's had some thoughts put down, need more time? Another minute?
I have a
Yes, Ed.
comment, and I guess it's a question of you.
Yes.
I think this fits, but maybe not, I don't know, but I'm concerned that we're caught up in the details in this committee rather than focusing on larger, more comprehensive concerns. So we're just kind of drilling down on certain things and not keeping that broad overview. Do you feel like we as a committee are behind at this point, or we on track?
Let's capture that. I want to capture that, and then we can talk about that. So, Jason, the point that Ed made was to say that he feels that the group has started to go into detailed issues where, at this stage, he feels that it really should be a high-level thinking, not hone in on the detail.
Right.
If you can just say concern is too much too much detail and too little high level. I would say that, you know, the process as it has happened from the beginning is that the committees have met, even before we met in February, not so. So already you had discussions, you were so ready to go, and you were ready to write the plan probably. And then, since then till now, you also have meetings, and you discuss certain things, and I'm sure that every one of you feel anxious that why do things move faster? Well, a typical plan, the committees do not have that much discussion without the consultant. In fact, the consultant should always be present when we have discussions, really to understand and learn about issues. So the fact that you've met without us, and unfortunately this happened that way, caused that disconnect. And I think that's largely part of what some of the things may be about today will be because of that. But to answer you, we actually at the point where we need to be 100%, and because we're in the beginning of the engagement, it's still very high level. It will stay there for a while till we go into the detail. So your observation that it's too much detail now and too little high level, absolutely true. And we hope that this process or the discussion today will actually help to clear that up.
I would think it kind of goes both ways, because I think, you know, obviously the devil's in the details, and this plan needs to be detailed, it needs to be very specific. And you also want it to be authentic. I think the key is learning at the macro level how to prioritize some of the thinking. And sometimes the details, the issues will drive that, obviously. So it's sometimes getting all the issues and details out, and sort of figuring out how to frame those appropriately. So that then you can come back and expand some of the macro issues. So I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing to flush things out. What happens is, because you guys are also limited on just time, I mean, you can't meet indefinitely, is to make sure that you cover your agenda item and leave enough room to sort of sweep up the details into something that has some framework so you can collect it and feed it back. And so it's sort of managing time in those discussions to make sure you don't get so bogged down into the weeds. And sometimes it's, you know, hey, let's suspend judgment on that. We've got it, but we'll have to come back and revisit that in more detail, because that conversation actually may need to be flushed out because it does become a priority, and that's a leg that we need to run down and detail out at some point in time. So I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just figuring out time management, or figure out how to prioritize the macro stuff, and then maybe footnote the smaller details, the minutia, as it becomes more and more important and more strategic in your plan. So.
And I want to make sure, Kathleen, I know you have a great show of hand, but please, I want to make sure that you heard what Jason said, and you can hear that it's clear on your end, and that the sound is good on your end. Can you just confirm, please?
She's good.
Okay, she's good. Thank you. So I'm going to start with you, Nicole, and give me the top one on your list, please.
Mainly I was thinking about like the high schoolers, since they are the future of the town. Are we gonna have representatives to maybe go and talk to the high schoolers, maybe while they're in school, like contact an ethics class or something like that?
That's a good point. Let's record that. Making sure reaching out to high schoolers. Absolutely. Thank you for that. What is the top one on your list, Brad? Let's go to Paul. What is the top one on your list, Paul?
I think the kind of a theme I've heard is communicating the whole process.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
See how it all fits together.
Right. So communicating the process. It wasn't clear. I hope that this morning helped with
Yes.
clarity, I hope. But again, if there's anything about clarity for you, or you're unclear, or anyone is unclear about anything, let us know about it. But thank you for that point. Cool. John,
Just the acceptance and the implementation of it.
so why is it a concern for you?
Well, not necessarily a concern, right? It's more of a, we're here listening, sharing ideas, and when we present this, we want the community to feel like, man, that was time and money well spent.
So your concern is how to convey the outcome of this
There you go.
process so that the community hear it and understand it. So it's delivering the final plan to the community.
Correct.
That you want to make sure that happens the right way.
Mhm.
Thank you, Juan, appreciate that. Is it Juan or Joan?
One.
Juan, thank you. Ed, you had your top one, thank you. Steve.
I don't have anything to add to this.
Sure, well, thank you. And, as we go around, if everything's already mentioned on your list, then you just jump to the next person. And we save time that way. Good.
Well, I would kind of summarize my notes here by just kind of reiterating what Ed said. And it seems as though we've spent quite a bit of time talking about details of the process. And I feel like there's some anxiety among the committee members and maybe even people out in the community. They're ready to get into the meat and the content of the community of Nacogdoches, and a little bit less about this engagement process, which is important, by the way. It has to be clearly defined.
Right.
But I'm hearing in general that there is we spent quite a bit of time when you guys first came on board,
Right.
and we're still talking about the process. So I think that the sooner we can start seeing how some of this information that you guys have been receiving from the process and from this group, we can kind of see how that's going to be used and translated
Exactly.
into the
Exactly.
into the plan. I think you may see a little see some of that anxiety. Hopefully, you'll see some of that anxiety subside. So that's my general what I have to offer.
And I think that's a great point, and I certainly can understand y'all been working and thinking and kind of building towards the plan. And I think the important part here is to let the existing conditions document. If there's something that's missing that y'all feel like needs to be covered, that's the framework or sort of the base that we're gonna build off of to do kind of a deeper dive into public engagement to make sure that we get as many fingerprints on this plan. And, really your role will be to guide that process, right? Make sure we're asking the right questions, and so the public engagement feedback will help us take all the responses that we got, building upon that initial framework, the existing conditions, and building upon that public engagement process to start validating what I would call big bullet points, the macro issues. So we're gonna spend a lot of time being patient, and I'm the same way. We want, obviously we're thinking about the end in mind, and how can we start creating value today? But a lot of the public engagement is going to start driving what are the issues, prioritizing those, and then meeting internally to sort of flush out, okay, what are the issues, what's resolved, how do we value capture? And I think you'll get a better sense of where the plan's going once we get public engagement. We're able to internally validate it. So the most important thing is are we on the right track in terms of existing conditions? Is there some framework that, for whatever reason, y'all know that we don't know, that we need to go test out in terms of the public engagement? And then are we hitting all the buttons as a persona worksheet, or are we hitting everybody we need to talk to make sure we get feedback on all the issues that people might be thinking about that need to be addressed in the plan? And so that's kind of where we're at. But I can understand y'all want to review goals and actions, and we want to be able to respond to that. We agree or disagree, but I think we're going to it's hard to be patient on that, but we've got to let the public engagement sort of feed us that prioritization and start feeding us those specific issues. Because there are going to be cohorts, groups that we hear things from that we had no idea that was necessarily an issue, but it may be a leading issue in the neighborhood, or maybe holding back industry, or may create conflict between skill sets that are needed. And so all of that will help us start driving the plan and framing it up. So
also that unfortunately the schedule had to move out a little bit, a month or two, because of the student, the summer period. We would have had next week's visioning probably 2 months ago already. So everything had to push out. So that added to, since February, the delay. So unfortunately.
That was a good change, by the way. I think extending that was that was a good decision.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. It's a
Yeah.
positive comment, so thank you for that. Yes.
What's your position on zoning? I checked out the books that were selected by DTJ, and almost all the 16 books that are in the library all want to get rid of single-family residence zoning. Is that the position of your company?
No, absolutely not. Let's write it out. There's a concern about, or perception, that the consultant team wants to push the deletion of single-family homes in Nacogdoches. That's a perception.
It's in the books, though. All 16 books selected, and I'm just curious how did they get selected for that?
Well, Francois, I can address that. If you think about the whole of the country, there's a lot of housing shortage issues in like a lot of the states, California, even in Texas, and some of the faster growing communities like Austin. So a lot of the books respond to the issues that a lot of these urban places are facing. It doesn't necessarily mean that same issues are plaguing Nacogdoches. They're not, and that's the reason why we need to understand what the specific issues are in Nacogdoches and see what solution makes sense.
Well, that's good.
So
They talked about mostly about San Francisco, Berkeley,
Right.
Austin, New
Yeah,
York
exactly.
City. And I was like, but even in the council meeting last night, the city government people were like, we're very isolated. We're not subject to the fast, rapid rise in real
Exactly.
estate prices or the falls. So we're a different community.
So we
That's what
understand
we're-
that, yes, yeah, I
okay.
mean, we absolutely understand that. Those books respond to what is the common issues that a lot of the urban population is dealing with, and we totally understand that Nacogdoches is not in the same context, so all that we're gonna look at and recommend is gonna be tailored to what the specific issues are. And we know that you do have an issue where a lot of your single-family neighborhoods are zoned for, duplex or multifamily, and maybe that's not appropriate in the Nacogdoches context because you do want to preserve. So we absolutely recognize that.
That's good, because I think that's one of the fears of people that they have here.
And thank you for bringing that up, Brad, because we want to hear about those fears.
Yeah.
And if we don't hear about it, the perception will continue to be there. I'm happy to mention that Flavia, who started very recently at DDJ, she worked at, what is the place that you worked at? Texas Target Community. It's very small communities that just don't have the funds to do even a comprehensive plan or do even land use planning. And this is an organization that helps those communities. So of course you need to understand what are their limitations, what are their predicaments that they are in. So that mindset is part of this group that understand whenever we're in a community, it's unique to that community. It's not, you don't recreate an Austin or a Dallas. You ask yourself, what community am I working in? What is the culture there? What is important to people? What is dear to them? And how can we promote that and protect that and not destroy that?
I think if you tell us that more often, there will be less fear. There's a great fear of top-down management here, of people from the outside coming and telling us how to live. And I've heard that from many, many people. They're like, we're fine, we make a living and we like our little town, so.
I think, in going back to the conversation with Kurt, I think it's very important that we make sure that we get as much input from the personas as possible, and that we ask the right questions, right? If all I ask you is, what do you not like about single-family neighborhoods, and then we come back and tell you that, well, there's all these issues with your existing neighborhoods, and that's sort of biasing the question.
Yeah.
Sometimes reading those documents tell you, hey, there's some different housing, some national
Francois.
involved in it so that this does become uniquely your plan and it aligns with your value proposition and your core values and your goals. So.
And Jason, the other thing we have learned, and this is something that we also experience in areas that are not growing as fast and the market is not as hard, is developers don't wanna build new neighborhoods, new subdivisions here because they're not making as much money and they're not gonna get as much money on a single lot as they would in the Dallas area, for example. So how do you kind of bridge the gap and get the right kind of developers to even get new single families? So I'm guessing that it's not, so there are challenges on both the sides where you wanna make sure you're getting developers to actually show interest because you do have some growth and you wanna respond to the needs of the community as it grows.
And I will say that if, we interview, major companies, saying the biggest issue we have is we don't have the type of housing that our employees wanna live in, and, we get that response, consistently. And then we're asked the question from an economic standpoint, or the things from an economic standpoint that might be more efficient with the real estate, and the response to that might be, assuming that they're asking for density, might be that is an option to consider if you're looking to maximize the value of real estate, and we've got 90% of the employers say that we need housing that you don't have. That doesn't necessarily mean that we want to change the fabric or ruin the integrity or neighborhood health of existing residential. And we may figure out that there's more estate housing that's missing, and there's more executives that may move here if there's more newer housing that was at a higher end that complements what you already have.
Is that the goal, to grow the city?
I think that's a great
And grow
question
the
too.
tax base?
I think the question is yes. I think that's going to be likely one objective from an economic standpoint, is to look for ways to grow the city.
But sustainably.
But it doesn't mean that's the priority, right? I mean, there may be other priorities that drive it. That may be a weighted factor, but that's not the only factor. And for me, preserving integrity, preserving your history and character has to be a strong weighted factor as well. And at some point, we have to figure out how to calibrate all those factors in terms of making recommendations.
I mean, the reality is the infrastructure and everything that you have to reinvest in as a community, even for the population you have, is gonna need some way to kind of, where you're gonna get the money to reinvest in just the services that you have to provide to the community. So you have to kind of balance that out too, so.
Brad, I want to share with you what we experienced, and yes, I would definitely like you to also comment, please, but I would like to share, Brad, with you what we experienced in the previous master plan. For 20 years, the city management pushed industrial progress and development, with the result that the majority of residents were of the blue-collar workforce, not so. With the result that any executive of that business, of that factory, didn't want to live in the city because there were no quality housing available. They moved to the next door city, and the city lost out on that. Now, there were two prongs to that. There was the pushing of industrial, but no amenities were provided, no parks, no trails, no good things. When we did the comprehensive plan about 7 years ago, we told the community, and it was the vision of the plan, quality of life is number one. And we had 3 catalyst projects out of that. The city manager took that, he turned the city around. Within 5 years today, he's getting the best quality parks implemented because that attracts the executives, the high income people to come and live there and want to live there. That's what you want to achieve for your community, where you attract the very people you want to be here as part of your community. As an example, what is done there?
It's interesting. I think another community that Francois was referencing, though, to answer your question, there was a long 20-year track record of just growing jobs, but then what happened is that it was all blue-collar jobs that bought lower income housing, and there was never that reinvestment on the other side. And so essentially, you look at it, if it was a strategy the community wanted, but I think the question is what type of growth do you want, and what is the intended outcome of that growth, and making sure that it's managed appropriately. And I think that's one thing, we're dealing with communities that have 800 housing permits right now, annually or more, and there's so much growth that you're not able to manage that very well. And I think in your case, it is sort of, a little bit slower growth, a little bit more managed growth, and I think you have to be a little bit more strategic and anticipate things. So growth, there's an unintended consequences that we also want to make sure that.
So good question. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that.
Thank you for
Would you like to ask? Yes, please. If you just say who you are.
I'm Brandy Cartwright. I'm actually on the downtown committee.
Oh,
I
yes.
can't make it tomorrow, so I thought I would come and
Yes,
speaking
Dennis.
about what Brian, I was just talking about is, I think at that meeting, that city council meeting, somebody got up and spoke about how we might need educational or workshop type, I mean, so we can be educated about this planning and zoning and single family
Exactly.
housing and all
Right,
this other stuff.
right.
And are we going to do any of that, one, and are you guys gonna continue to meet with us when you?
So two-pronged question. One is about, are there education opportunities for the community to learn
Or,
all the Cpac and DTAC about planning principles? That's the first question. The next question is, will we continue to meet with you in person? So to answer your first question, I really need to defer to staff.
Yeah, staff is working on creating, some opportunities to bring speakers in from other communities who have recently gone through this process, to talk about comprehensive planning, housing, how all that fits into it, and essentially have almost like a panel discussion. So we haven't finalized that yet. We're still working on it, in response to that comment that was made at City Council. But as soon as we get details, we'll share them with the group first thing, and make sure that it's publicized. So we are working on that. It's a work in progress.
It may, and I haven't thought about this, just came to my mind, but it may, in terms of the public engagement, depending on some of the topics and priorities that emerge out of that, it may be sort of good to lean those conversations towards specialists that might have more experience in those topics that start to emerge. Just in terms of timing, it may work out naturally to accommodate that anyway, but walkability or connections, and I have a suggestion for that, rather if it was really housing higher choices or whatever ends up emerging.
And Jason, and the other thing is that we on the team are also, we've worked in other contexts where we have had similar issues where we've had to deal with zoning, and the whole point of the existing conditions was for us to study these very issues that you're all bringing up, and it was very timely that you had the discussion at council, and we're like, okay, we know that this is an issue, so we may want to get ahead of the curve and kind of look at the specific zoning related issues as it relates to the existing neighborhoods, and work with staff to do some interim tweaks, so that way those policies can be embedded in the comp plan, and, work on, try and kind of fast track some of those. And we are having the neighborhood focus group meeting later today, and then so there are going to be ongoing discussions, and maybe that can take a parallel path that can be fast tracked. And so we are the experts in kind of bringing the implementation tools, and so we are being made aware of those very issues that you're bringing up.
So the second question about whether we will be at all the city committee meetings or the advisory committee meetings is not according to the contract and the schedule, no. We want at all of them. Ideally, we would have liked to, but, there had to be at some point you have to come to say, this is how much can be spent on this project, and we can only, because of that, include so many meetings in person. That's why some of them are virtual. So, unfortunately, that is just the situation that it is.
But I think we can document the milestones and when we will be here, try to take advantage of that. So I know we're back, you guys are here tomorrow, and I'm back, Thursday, Friday, and so to the extent we can squeeze in some things while we're here and take advantage of that, or if there's, conversation, we're trying to maximize, those trips.
Yeah, and I will just note that when it comes to actually like reviewing those chapters, elements of the plan, they will be in person for that, so we can get into the weeds and have that in-person kind of dialogue. They just won't be able to attend every single committee meeting, but the ones where we're really getting into the weeds of the policies and recommendations that are going forward, yes, all those will be in person.
And in fact, next week's two-day event, we would have only come on Thursday and Friday, maybe arrive here on Wednesday evening. But we decided to arrive Wednesday morning to be able to meet with the DTAC and to go through their existing conditions memo, because we learned that you guys rather would have wanted to see us in person for that, not so. We learned. So now for the DTAC, we're going to be there in person. So it is important. We recognize it's important. So we find ways to overcome that concern.
We want to be here. I love this, and again, if we could have the entire city, with presence and have these conversations and it was organized, for us, that's nirvana. We want to be here.
It is, absolutely. It is ideal. Thank you for that. Michelle. Larry.
Earlier in the discussion of one of the issues, I believe you made the point about you wanted to hear, from or we had given input into the questions in the surveys and things. And that's not really the case. There hasn't been wide discussion, and I think that's one of the concerns that some of us have, is that we're already collecting data, but we don't know if that data is directed toward things that were really concerned to us.
What I can say is that the survey really is based on a team that have done so many of these projects, so many of these surveys. So it comes from a pool base of understanding how to ask a question, number one, what to ask. So that's the basis. Now, we then of course share with staff, because staff wants to make sure that everything is said the right way with this culture in mind. Now, you can only go so far in terms of going into the detail of all the questions. It will take endless time to go and review every survey by a team. They always say don't design something by, anything designed by a team will never work. So we have to find some solution or a cutoff where, yes, it makes sense to share and talk, and some point that you don't.
Well, and I don't think I'm talking about designing a survey by team, but just discussion of what the
What needs to
issues
be on it,
need
yeah.
to be covered.
Yeah, okay.
What are the issues that need to be there,
Right.
I think is one concern. And we really haven't had discussion. I think Ed and maybe Kurt, mentioned that we haven't really gotten down to the meat of the issues. And so we're collecting data on issues that may not be
Yeah.
the real issue.
That's a good point.
And,
But surveys are only one way we're collecting data. These meetings that we're having, you all with the focus group, so we have several other meetings. So surveys are not the best way to get into some of the nitty-gritty of some of the issues.
I
But
understand.
that's why we are asking, that's why we're here, we're talking to you, so.
And that's one reason why we asked that y'all be here to talk to us.
Yeah.
And I think we would like to do some more talking. And I've asked several people to fill out the survey. I looked at the questions beforehand, because they were given to us beforehand, some of us. And then I've asked several people in the community to fill the survey out. I've gotten feedback from people that range from, it wouldn't accept my answers. And that's a technical issue, and I wasn't there, and so I can't tell what's going on there when they were filling it out. To, it's forcing me to make some decisions that I can't really make, or some evaluations. To, I don't know how this is gonna be interpreted. So I think some of the questions, for example, the rank order questions, are a little, I guess, and when I read it first, I didn't see this, but other people see it, and I think that's the advantage of testing and having eyes on a survey like that in the community that you're trying to get the responses from is valuable. Because I didn't see some of the things that people have pointed out to me in the survey. When I first read it, I thought it was, in fact, I told Elena I thought those questions were good. And so other people are telling me, well, I have a question about this question, I have a question about that question, and I never saw it, but other people did.
Some of it's personality, right? I mean, again, if there's technical issues, or, if you have that feedback, you email Elena and let her figure out if there's something that can be mitigated.
Yeah, I had a couple of people tell me they couldn't finish the survey,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't take their answers.
Or Survey Monkey, what is it?
Yeah, that's a really good, yeah.
So, I mean, I would think, if.
And I don't know if Survey Monkey is,
It's a gold
prefers, if it prefers, and I've used it before, but I've used it in a long time because I went to Qualtrics and I don't use it anymore. I don't know if it, prefers one browser over another browser or something like that, and that's the problem.
I think, my guess is that Survey Monkey is probably fine. I don't know what the issue is, it's just user error, but I would just say if there's specific issues that you get feedback on, it would be great if you can just send that to Elena, and then we can figure out if there's something that can be mitigated. They can switch to a browser, they can come out of the library, if they don't like the way the question's written.
Yeah.
I think just making sure that staff gets benefit of that.
Yeah, we
What I
did.
don't wanna do is if you get 3 or 4 people saying, I couldn't finish it, and I didn't like the question, then, the perception is that the survey was bad and everybody had issues with it, but that may or may not be true. If everybody here had success, 600 responses, then, you know, maybe you just isolated cases.
And I think part of my concern is that those questions probably should be tested with an audience that, you know, of who it's
Sure.
intended for. Whenever I do a survey, I always do a test run with people, you know, a sample of the people that I'm going to be doing it with, because I want to know feedback from them. Because I'm, you know, I sometimes I don't see things
Right.
that other people see.
Right. And I think that's a good point. I think the point is you've got experience in surveying, and you sort of are, I'm not saying challenging, but you have some recommendations, or, you know, I think that's a great opportunity. And I think as part of the committee, hey, there may be another way of doing this, or we think you should, you know, do a user review test pool before we release that, and I think staff and Civic Brand and the consultant team can make a decision if that's, you know, can be accommodated within the process, or it may just be a comment, hey, there may be a better way of doing it. But if we get 600 responses and we feel like the response rate is good, and yes, maybe there's some 2 or 3 people that didn't get to respond the way they wanted to, or they didn't like the way the survey was responded, at least don't let perfect get in the way of good, right? I think that, you know, in general, we may get the feedback that we need in order to advance.
These are not statistically valid, valid surveys, that's not what we're doing. This is just to get a sense of the issues, but as you said, that's only one data point. We want to make sure that we footnote the surveys that it's not statistically valid. We had other opportunities for the community to provide input, so we cover all our bases.
I
Yeah.
just want to
Yes.
point out, with SurveyMonkey, you have to be careful with the accessibility function of it. Sometimes it does not allow you to do that, so we want to make sure that we have that accessibility function for the visually and hearing impaired that are taking that survey.
That's a good point. That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, we did test the survey as far as like going through, answering it and submitting to make sure like, does this work? And then we had some of our Spanish speaking staff go through the Spanish to make sure like, does this make sense? Is this conversational? So we did do that. Has anyone here in the room actually gone through and submitted the survey? Did you guys have any questions on, have any issues on submitting it, like it accepting your answers, or you didn't? Okay.
Well, things that disturbed me a little bit was like, it said, name 5 things that you want to change about Nacogdoches. And if you only had 2 things, it wouldn't accept your answer. And so therefore, your
okay.
answers were forced. It's like, I want to change this and I want to change that. I didn't have any interest in those other things, but without me picking some things I wasn't interested in, they wouldn't let me go on.
And maybe
I
that's
see.
why it wouldn't accept those people's answers.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Like I said, I wasn't sitting there and watching them take it. They just did it on their own, and
And
then
the
I
same-
got feedback from them that,
The same thing on the ranking from 1 to 10 on this one question. I accidentally just pushed my finger along it, and it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It ranked it for me without me
That's nice.
ever, which I thought was how convenient.
Well,
But not.
you had a slide on that one, you had a slide into the position you wanted. It took me a few minutes, I was like,
Well,
wait a
there's no
minute, how does this
instructions for
work?
that.
Right, and that's a good point, and we will make a note of that. The instruction, if you get there.
Maybe people don't want to answer as much as you.
Or they don't want, they will be forced to give an answer when that doesn't apply to them.
Yeah, yeah.
I absolutely understand and agree with you.
Thank you.
So, and we can make, we can make the change tonight, if it's for the, consultant who put it together for us, the technical part of it, and just fix that, so it
Yes.
can be done. So, thanks for bringing it up. Derek, how do you feel about our discussion about the surveys? Feel more comfortable about it, more, that we go in the right direction?
well, I mean, like I said, those are just the feedback that I got from people
Sure.
that tried to take the survey.
All right, thank you for bringing it up, I appreciate that, and thank you for that input as well. Sydney?
I think y'all addressed it. The only thing that I was kind of worried about was just connecting with some kind of underserved population, especially Latinx in our community, because I don't know that we have the connections within our committee enough to make those, but I feel like we answered that.
So, Mabel, so what we're doing right now, you might be out when we asked the question, we asked the question to the group. We have heard that at council meetings, there were comments made about the project, whether it's the process or the content or what was lying ahead on anxieties, fears, etc. We also staff heard from the committees that there were concerns expressed, what they again have heard from the community. So what we ask people is just to put down maybe the top 5 issues and problems that they've heard or have themselves about, so that we can talk about that. So I will definitely give you some time to do that. I'm going to jump to Kathleen and ask her. So if you see some
By all
thoughts on that.
means, jump to Kathleen.
Okay, so Kathleen, give us the top one on your list, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
So, you know, I guess you have put together your 5 top issues, concerns with the plan in terms of the process, or just, you know, what's lying ahead, or any of the issues. So we asked people to write out, so your top one, what is the first one on your list, Kathleen?
So, okay, I'll tell you, my major concern is that it seems like you assume that we have had an opportunity to be sure that we're on the right track and that we're asking the right questions. I think that's part of Ed Poole's discussion of the broader issues. And we really haven't had that opportunity to do that. So that's my major concern, is that the broader issues of how we guide this process, we really haven't been able to engage in that discussion. The technique of what, we've told over and over again, this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to be, but we haven't engaged in discussions. Are we asking the right questions? What does the data say? Are we collecting the right data for our community? That hasn't happened.
Actually, that is what Larry just now addressed. So, and I think we've addressed that. And have you heard the discussion about that, Kathleen? We just had about the survey or surveys.
No. I mean, we had original questions about the first survey. Just some of them the questions were kind of negative. Some put people on the spot to make decisions about things they didn't know. But I'm sorry, I have a fever. So I have COVID and a fever, so I may not be getting this across well. And I think I'm going to have to go in a minute. But it's the big issues of how we guide this. What data are we actually collecting? What data do we want to collect? There's specific data I'd like to see collected because we're a rural community out in the middle of nowhere. And there are questions I would have hoped we could have asked, but we were told, no, we can't touch any of the questions. So that's really, I think, a problem. And it flags future problems.
Right. So really it's about the survey questions. What is the next one on your list, Kathleen? The next item on your list?
Oh, sorry.
I don't, if you're talking to me, I couldn't hear you or understand you. But I'm not going to say any more. I really have a high fever right now.
Kathleen, this is Jason, part of the consultant team. Could you share with us what questions specifically that we need to ask, or would you mind sharing those in writing? And then can you also, I'm a data nerd, so I'm specifically interested in any data that you feel like that we need to include in the report.
Sure, I'd love to have just to visit with you over the summer too, and I'd be happy to share. I'm a data nerd too, and I also have done a lot of surveys. I think you're I think we might have like a gap in maybe what you understand from us and what we understand from you. I think it's you assume that we're trying to be technical when in actuality we're trying to make sure that our community does have an opportunity to talk about the things that are important to them. But yeah, I'd love to have a phone call with you personally, but I think it would be helpful. And I also think, I'm so sorry I don't have her name. I've asked, just as a city council member, if we could have a discussion with you all about some of these zoning questions, because we have some things coming up right away, and I would love your input into some of the issues that we're facing. But I'm not, I was told we were going to be able to have that, but I don't know where, but I think it would be very, very helpful to have a discussion with you.
Yeah.
Not just to allay the fears about zoning, but also to provide some guidance right now as we're trying to think about residential development even before next year.
You guys are doing an in-person one-on-one interview.
So yeah, call me. Ask for my phone number. I'm around. I'm happy to have discussions with you. And I had a whole, I have a written document, but it's easier, I think, to have a phone conversation.
Well, maybe
But
we-
thanks.
I know you're under the weather, so maybe we'll share both. I'll send you some information, just some questions, and then,
Sure.
I think we'll reserve some time, because I'll be back next week, and I'll share my contact information, but I think there'll be a chance to maybe have that dialogue in person as well.
Right, and I think it would be helpful also to have a dialogue with, I am so sorry I don't have your name and the lady who was talking about zoning. Really great answers, so impressive. I think that would be helpful.
I will make sure I get my information to Elena and the rest of the team, and I hope you get to feeling better.
And we've already
Thank you.
started some of those discussions as a response to the council meeting. We're starting the discussion with staff and trying to get some of the background data on the zoning cases and so we are already doing that.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, so let me go around. Next one on your list, Nicole.
I was mainly wondering, it's sort of a hot button issue now, like what we're gonna do to correlate what we're doing now with the certificate of obligation that's being discussed in city council. Like how would those decisions we make, would that affect our planning in the future?
Right, so I may defer to Stan.
Mario.
Mario, can I defer to you?
Mario.
We'll repeat the question for you.
Yes. So, the question was from Nicole about the certificate of obligations, which is currently under discussion by council and staff, and you wanted to know, and you want to express your question about that?
How that certificate affect what we're talking about in this? Because I know there are some things for a new fire station, and that is part of the comprehensive plan is to, you know, increase our fire department or make it more effective for our city.
Well, can everybody hear me okay? Well, I think I got the mic. It does affect it. One of the things that was done way ahead of the fire station discussion was a fire location study that was completed by an engineer. And so absolutely, it's not just one, it's all the stations. So absolutely needs to be folded in as part of the comprehensive land use plan, whether it's identifying where the locations are today, and identifying those, and also identifying where they could be located based on that study. So I think adding that as an appendix or as a tab in the plan needs to be folded into that conversation.
And how they'll be funded and the long-term funding
Correct.
for all kind of infrastructure and
Correct.
grow and change.
Yes. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. It's just mainly I was thinking, well, if they pass this and then we do make a central fire station, and that's one of our bullet points on the plan, should we focus on that on the plan? Or should we make another goal to cover that?
I think it's
Or
really
leave it as a checkbox?
right. I think it's up to the committee how you all want to pursue it. Again, if there is the opportunity to proceed with that process with the certificates of obligation and the construction of said facility, you could add this as a goal, and it's a short-term goal because it's in the process of getting funded and being constructed. But it's all folded in with a previous study that was conducted just a year and a half ago.
So at the interest of time, we are going to go fairly quickly around the room. Brad, what's the next one on your list?
Well, in relation to that, the study that he's talking about, talked about in order to keep the response times correct, once you move one station, it's like shaking a tablecloth, you have to move all of them. So to me, if they're gonna be honest about it, it's not 30 million or $8 million for a fire station, it's like dominoes, it falls over, you're gonna owe 200
Is this a discussion that can be had with the CIO group? Because we have a limit of time. I want to get to the issues that we can talk about. Is there anything else about the process or the,
Common perception in Nacogdoches is that you're here to tax us, to increase the tax base, to change us fundamentally from the town that we are into more of a urban town, with preconceived ideas of what we need, which is parks and walkability and all those things. And just for clarification, I live in a duplex, I own a duplex, so I'm not a single-family residence person. I'm just interested in zoning. And also the common perception is that you wanna make the lot smaller because there is a interest in getting more taxation on the property. Yes or no?
It's important to hear about these things.
That's a guy that lives in a duplex, right?
Well, you know, I just don't wanna be, people oftentimes categorize you like, well, you're a NIMBY, you're a homeowner type of thing. I live in a duplex, I live in a mixed neighborhood.
So let me just say for the record, I think I'll speak on behalf of DTJ and the team. We're not gonna make any recommendations that we don't get validation in terms of either best practice, in terms of principles that align with the public engagement and that build upon the existing condition information that we have. So we're not gonna come and make stuff up. We're not gonna Austinize or Dallasize Nacogdoches. But if economic development is a goal, then density is one way to accommodate that. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a priority. So this plan will be objective. It'll have your fingerprints on it. We're not gonna make 100% of people happy, but it does need to represent the majority, and that's gonna be the essence of this goal. So it needs to be a unique plan to Nacogdoches. And you have, I think, our commitment and assurance that will be the case. There may be goals that conflict with your personal values, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a plan that wasn't democratic and that wasn't built upon the public engagement that we got. And that's one of the reasons why I love working with Civic Brand, is because they have a unique process and the persona engagement. They really try to be as inclusive as possible and really reach out to as many groups as possible that probably would never be recognized on any other planning process, going a traditional ask questions and figure out how to divide it. So anyway, I know we're limited on time, but I'll just say this.
One last thing, I think, can I add one last thing? So if you think about the city as a business, a private corporation, typically cities are not, but if you kind of use that mentality, it's about creating a business plan, because the city, it has limited funding sources and the state keeps kind of coming at it. And so you have to kind of figure out, for the services that the city provides, it's water, sewer, library, police, fire, everything, like what are the citizens, you all are willing to pay, and you have to balance the needs with what the community is willing to pay. At the end of the day, it's all your community. So it's, if you all don't want to pay taxes, at some point the services have to be cut. It's a balancing act, and how can you get funding through, whether it's sales tax or other fees, etc., or it's things like many cities have impact fees, and we're not recommending any of that. We're just saying that here are all the tools the city has in their toolbox to be able to fund public infrastructure, and what is the right fit for Nacogdoches given the level of service that you are all willing to pay for. At the end of the day, you're not going to be able to fund everything. You'll have to prioritize. So it's trying to help you all prioritize to say, okay, if you're funding this, let's make sure that you get multiple benefits and you get many things out of it, so you're not just building a road to nowhere.
So we're really limited on time, so any one of you have something that's burning, they have to share that right now. Any one of you. Paul, anything burning?
I'm good. She thought that answered my question, and that was a question that Brad.
Yeah. Wonderful. Anything burning, Ed? You need to ask that.
Number two.
Still, anything burning? Good.
This is not really burning, but quickly, I'll just add this kind of as an observation. Say you have some concerned citizens in Nacogdoches who wanna offer input with regard to, ideas about how infrastructure needs to be developed and enhanced. And these meetings are, clearly, they're open to the public, and so some people may show up to a meeting and they're ready to share their thoughts about, infrastructure and these high-level details, and then somebody stands up and says, I know what you're saying, I know what you're gonna say. Somebody stands up and says, well, we need another HEB. And so all of a sudden, a discussion about infrastructure turns into whether or not we need an HEB or Brookshire Brothers grocery store, or a water park or some, another, park or whatever. And all I would say is if there's a way you guys can maintain the, focus of the topic at hand, and I know you've run into this before.
Right.
I would encourage you to please do so, because I think when people come to a meeting and they wanna share certain thoughts, and the meeting gets hijacked with somebody else's ideas from the floor, then I think we get nowhere.
Absolutely,
And
and
so,
we will address that with the
and so,
facilitation
so anyhow,
process.
that's just more of an
Yeah.
observation. And yes, someone can control their own meeting through a meeting in a box and talk about and submit that
Yeah.
individually. So I get that, and
We're really good about staying on track and agenda, sort of extracting what we need, but again, I think it's hard when you're meeting as a committee and everybody, the same thing internally, you all have the same issue meeting, I think you expressed it earlier. It's a challenge of kind of balancing time management, and making sure that you get out of the meeting what you need to get out, but also giving people a place to talk and be creative and free flow, because sometimes good ideas come out of that conversation.
certainly, understood. That's it.
Denise, anything burning? Larry, anything burning? Sydney?
I really want HEB.
Me too.
Mabel, anything? So I would really like for you to give us your notes, please, if you don't mind. And if you can't make it running, we will ask you to come and tell us. But can you share that with us, please? And I'm sorry for the time, but we just don't have enough time to go through everything. So right now, if we just quickly go over
That was that thing.
the next steps.
Hey, first of all,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, before I go to the next steps, in fact, the next step I want you to do for us, please, is do the survey. Nicole, you are doing it right now. As you do it, and as you pick up things that you're concerned about, it doesn't make sense, or you have struggled with, let us know so we can fix it. Because certain things, is this a technical issue? It can be fixed easily, it's a click of a button. But let us know, please, and of your buddies or anyone who have an issue with the survey.
Not the survey, but the meeting in the box, I did notice when I did mine, like it kind of goes away. So I think I texted or I emailed Elena and was like, did it all just disappear?
Yeah, it was submitted.
So
It was
that might be
submitted.
helpful to just
Yeah.
let everybody know, like when you finish the meeting in the box thing, then it starts
Yes.
over. So it makes it
We make a note of
sort of
that.
look like it all just.
We get, City Grant note about that.
Okay.
I don't even think it's necessarily a problem, just as long as people
I
know.
know, I feel that happens to me, I'm so frustrated, I'm like, why does it happen? I've lost everything. So I want to go through the next steps quickly, anything you say, Jess, before I do that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So the next steps after today really is that we have the survey that we are doing right now, that will be open to somewhere in the middle of September. Next week is so important, I want to emphasize that, please be aware of it, and tell people about the public meeting, that is so important. So it's the 2 days, I'll go into the detail of that in a second, and then, so actually, let me go there. So the first day, just for you to see what it is. First day, we will have an in-person interview that morning. Then we have an in-person focus group meeting between 10 and 11:30. And that will build upon the fact that we have focus group meetings this week. And this one will be about transportation. Kurt, you mentioned that. We then have an in-person interview again after that. And then we have an in-person public meeting next week, Thursday. Then on Friday, the morning, we again have an in-person interview. We have another focus group meeting, and the topic is still to be determined. Then, noon to 3, this team will use the information we learned and heard about this week, next week, the survey, whatever we've heard. We're going to brainstorm the issues. And then we take those issues and we take it to between 3:30 and 6 o'clock, a vision session, where everybody that have been interviewed, everyone that participated in the focus group meeting are invited to attend, because now they have some background information, they become part of the process. And then we all together brainstorm ideas how to move forward. Whether it's a vision, whether it is just coming to some conclusion on some issues, or just address how we will take a specific topic and move forward. So the point being, you have to please make sure that you're at that meeting 3:30 to 6 o'clock, if you're not already part of any of the other meetings already, but you have to come to that last one. That is really, really important. So, then also Mountain Student Engagement. That's September 24, where there will be the workshop downtown. There will be the Cpac campus on the student engagement, and then also the public event engagement with the Art Fest. And then the last one, not last one, but the next one in November, and then still others coming after that will be November 5. So that's really the presentation that we have today. So finally, any comment, anything by staff, Mario, or anyone that wants to say something before we close?
So before we leave, we wanted to make sure that we communicated some of the recommendations that came out of the subcommittee that was created for review of the meeting in a box. So there were two different recommendations because the group was kind of split on the level of participation and review that was desired for the surveys to get published. And so one group wanted or requested to have the online survey questions sent to the committees in advance, have a couple of days to review, and then submit comments and questions back to staff to be incorporated into the survey. Another recommendation was to have a standing committee to review all these surveys in more detail. And so that subcommittee is, again, it's not a majority, so they don't have the authority to necessarily make decisions on behalf of the whole, so we wanted to bring it to the group and get some feedback on the level of participation in those two processes to see what kind of the desire was from the group on, is it just having the surveys in advance to review for a couple of days, get comments and feedbacks, to be incorporated, or have this elongated process, which can create some other issues that Francois can talk about as far as, delays and things like that. So I wanted to make sure we got feedback from everyone on those two different recommendations from the subcommittee.
Great, and staff at the back, anything to add? Good, I'm going to start with Kurt, and just go around quickly. Kurt, summarize just your experience today. Let us have a thought about today. Kurt.
Wow.
Wow. Still, last thought.
Immersive.
Ed. Focused, like it. Go.
Very revealing, and I think the more we talk to you guys, the more we learn, and I think the more we'll come.
Revealing, the more we talk, the more we learn. Great. Brad. Friendly. Thank you. Nicole.
Comprehensive?
Comprehensive. Kathleen, you next on the list. One word captured your experience?
I don't think she.
I agree with Paul. Revealing.
Good. You agree with Paul. Thank you. Michael.
Interesting.
Interesting. Sydney.
Transparent.
Transparent. Larry. Denise. Informative. Guys, thank you so much for coming again. We really appreciate it.
Wait, hey, Francois, can we go around the room real quick and just get kind of a general feedback on the desire to have the surveys reviewed ahead of time? I think we're going to do that anyway. I think we're just going to have everyone, look at the surveys, give you a couple of days in advance, but we want to get feedback on the additional kind of oversight and review that we heard from some of the committee members on these surveys, or.
I know I'm gonna get shot, but I'm gonna say it would be great to have your review. You just have insight. I mean, two heads are better than one. I would just say preservation of time. It's gotta be quick feedback. It may be a 24-hour turnaround, maybe a 48-hour turnaround. So, and I wanna say, and again, Francois will kick me later. This is not gonna be a perfect plan. And Larry, and you're not expecting it, but the survey is not gonna be perfect. We're not gonna get 100% of everybody's council input. There's gonna be an idea that's maybe a big idea that somebody comes up with 2 years from now. This is gonna be a living document, so but it needs to be a good document. There needs to be integrity in the process. But your priority's gonna change, the community's gonna change over time, and it's not up to us how quick that occurs. But there may be external influences. We all revisit some things, and so our job is to make this a good plan that has integrity, that represents, the next 20 years, and you are gonna change this in 5 years. I mean, you may not do this large of a process, but you're gonna continue to evolve and change the plan, and all council needs to do on the flood map, the future land use plan, is to have a meeting and vote on it. So, some of these things can change over time, and they will change over time, but we love working with communities, and we want, we want y'all to collectively agree on things that can help us drive a better plan, and if there's a better process, that we can accommodate, we will. We may not be able to accommodate everything, but it'll be our intention to make it as good as possible.
But we'll make sure we'll have a more specific schedule.
So specific to the survey and how we wanted you to then respond, and we want to take at heart that what you said, is that when we provide you the opportunity to do it and give us feedback, you probably will have a very short turnaround, because what happens if the longer you make it, the schedule will just be delayed. So just be cognizant of that. We will provide you the opportunity, but it will be a quick turnaround. So I just want to quickly mention that. Yes?
I have one thing. I'm doing a meeting in a box on Saturday at 2 o'clock for the bike community. So my husband's part of the bike club, and I know a bunch of mountain bikers. So if you guys know anybody in that community, send them to the library at 2 o'clock on Saturday.
And actually, we have two focus meetings today. The one is on economics, and then there's one on neighborhoods. So if there's any thought that you have about questions you hope that we address, issues during those two meetings, feel free to share it now after the meeting with us, and we'll just be aware of that.
Miss, what's the in-person interview number one that's after those two?
We have an interview, and listen, this one, we have as a team, we have an interview with an individual.
Okay.
And we just talk to him and ask questions and
Sure.
engage, basically. Yeah. So, well, thank you guys for your time. We really appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Right.